I think we are. This is incredible. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are finally live again to the common UI design review that we should have been doing for a really long time, and yet we're finally picking this up again. Today we're going to talk about 6 incredible award sites live and talk about everything that blew my mind, because UI UX design is evolving so quickly, and this week has definitely had some incredible changes in this direction. So again, I'm super duper happy to be here today. I know the question that's on your minds and mine: how did it take me this long to figure out green screen? It truly made me feel like a monkey, because I had no idea how to get green screen to work, especially on live stream, which shouldn't have happened, which is absolutely on me, which should not have happened. But finally we have green screen, and hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better about every disaster that we've had, especially because I think I remember last time we were live, the whole background just came down, and it was a disaster, if you remember the disaster that it was. Today we're talking about 6 incredible award sites, what they did right, what they did wrong, what you can learn as a UI UX designer. Let's get started. The first site that we're talking about today, AANNNNDDDD. Before we get started, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe, make sure to do everything you would do on a standard YouTube video that you do like, and say hi in the live chat, because of course this is the time to say hi. Let's get started. The first site that we're talking about is analogagency.com. This is going to be a fun site, because it takes your old, after 2012-ish animation that just came in, and it tries to make something modern with it. So again, I'm told this was a good site. No idea yet. Let's find out what this does together. Again, as soon as you get started, you get greeted with a pretty looking hero section which splits into 2, and then you get a bunch of text. Again, I'm not particularly impressed, but it does give you a little bit of hope, especially because this navigation bar at the top starts off giving you high hopes with its glass morphism, and I get that it's not the most obvious thing in the whole world, but glass morphism is when you have white, half partial, sort of glass, see-through-ish, and you get to see that happen in real time, and I think it's one of the very subtle things that gets this site to where it is, that actually gets this site to work right. So I think that's just the first of whatever this is going to have. Again, the whole screen kind of came small, kind of sat in the purview, and it just synced inside, and now you have all of these little sections that you can jump to. I think this does take very heavy inspiration from Apple, which is kind of about to become my catchphrase on this stream now, especially because these number of sites that are taking direct and indirect inspiration from Apple is just insane at this point. It's absolutely insane. And you have a bunch of really small cards, whatever you want to see, whatever you would prefer in the long term. I think the fact that really does get me to be happy about this section in itself is the fact that they remain kind of consistent, because usually at this point you would expect things to have already broken somehow, because you're taking a very unconventional approach as soon as you got started, but the fact that they have the cards and they're consistent is just good enough for me at this point. And then you get a bunch of case studies, all of which take up the entire space. And I think it's very relevant to mention here that there is not a lot of text to go off of, and you have to really zoom in hard to be able to see the really small piece of text that says C close, which C case, which is underwhelming, because of course you have all of this happen. None of this text is selectable, by the way. This is all a video, and you have 8-9 videos playing one after the other. You would expect at the very least to see a little bit more text. Things actually happen in real time. Things happen with a lot of fun, and I think this is particularly where things start to get underwhelming. Although questionably, underwhelming was the theme that the site started with. I don't want to question it just yet. You have a bento grid, which is apparently the standard normal for everything that should happen these days, which is kind of nice. And then you have a bunch of simple sections just following one after the other, and I think the reason I'm just so not surprised this time is because you ask for text, they give you text. You ask for images, they give you images. And yet when you need text, especially when you had the huge barrage of 9 case studies one after the other, it was just really hard to see. So I think everything that you should have, they do have. And yet, is the placement there? Nope. Is the positioning there? Nope. Do you have the right text when you need the right text? No, and I think this is exactly where I'm starting to get annoyed with the way things are going. And then you have your standard navigation bar, still glass morphism, everything is working exactly as it's supposed to, and it's again one of the continued patterns that follows us is this bento grid, which does not seem to change. And I think for a site that started its hero section with such vivid animations, I think this is getting overwhelming very, very quickly, and this is exactly which is what the point that's making me want to leave. And then you get hit with a very weird looking footer, because yes, we expected there to be a footer, and yes, we expected there to be some sort of sign up happening as soon as you reached, but hear me out. The reason I'm weirded out by the fact that this is the footer is because you took your navigation, morphed it into some version of a form, and made a footer out of it, and all that you've left at the bottom is not even a huge logo, not even a huge tagline, just your logo and tagline, no contact, no social media, which is weird and not the most beautiful thing at this point. So I think this is a very underwhelming site. They did try to put in a lot of effort with their bento grids and with their full page case study video displays, but every single time I'm trying to prove that they're actually doing something right, it just takes your entire idea of are they doing this right and just throws you off, which is exactly why I have to give this a 6 out of 10. Analog Agency, not the best site in the world. I'm not going to say it's the worst site in the world, and yet it's continuously underwhelming. So that's my feedback. The next site that we're talking about, ageofunion.com. This is I get the fact that this seems like something new, something you'd never have seen, but this seems to be something that I've either already seen 100 times or I'm getting some serious deja vu. So it's one of the two, because ageofunion.com, no idea what this does yet. And yet you get your standard bento grid. This looks like a newspaper as soon as you get started. And yes, there is talk of wildfires and talk of news. I think this has something to do with news, and I still don't know what this brand is about. And yet this does give you the whole particularly old school newspaper taken into a website vibe immediately, which is it the most pretty thing in the whole world? Nope. Does it take up space on your screen? Absolutely. What about white space? I think they just give you white space when they've got nothing left to do. But it's not the fanciest thing, and yet they've tried to be creative, which is nice. And I also like the fact that either the logo designer or someone got really creative, sat down, made sure the lines in the middle of GNE actually crossed, made sure ONF actually crossed. I have no idea why they do it, but they've done it, and it's what's setting you apart. It's not the most unbelievable thing. Yes, this has happened before, and yet there is a little bit of detail happening, and it's particularly one of the only things that actually sets you apart, other than the fact that they've tried to offset the image by a couple of centimeters, but it's not the fanciest thing in the world. I think as a hero section, what they have for the second part is actually a much better hero section compared to the first one, because now you have this image and all of the text, and I have no idea why they're putting the text over here twice. Maybe because this is a video, but again it's kind of a waste of space as far as putting the same exact thing over and over is concerned, and it does get quite exhausting looking at the same exact kind of layout over and over again. Again, you have images, you have text. This seems to be a news-ish site, and I think that is exactly what's going to happen now. But even as a news site, this is slightly more interesting, because your common news sites have this huge group of just text going and yet even as a news site, this is going to be really hard to read really quickly, and I want to highlight it's going to be hard to read, because just take a moment over here, go to ageofunion.com, try to read this article, and you won't be able to read it. I get the fact that they took a news kind of concept and tried to make it creative, but this is not the text size or the positioning or the family you'd use if you actually wanted to make anything fancy. Omkar Deptare says, thumbs up, thank you so much. We're reviewing incredible award sites, talking about what worked, what didn't work. And I'm still unnerved by the fact that they couldn't get center positioning to work. And that's the most unnerving thing you could do from the point of view of someone who's actually trying to be creative. So either they didn't know how to center things, or they just forgot, or it wasn't on their list of priorities. Whichever the case was, I'm not impressed. Check it out. This is like 50%, this is like 30%. What am I supposed to do over here? This is very, very unnerving to me, and it's very, very concerning. And again, you get related articles following the same vibe, and yet it's actually very repetitive and quite underwhelming. Like, they do start to do fancy things, especially when you reach kind of this section, but I have to argue that this would make for a much better hero than what they started with. Like, having some text, having 4 different news stories would have made a much better hero section, as opposed to just the one weird news box, which was present, yes, but it was just either too overused at this point, or just underwhelming for what it's worth. Again, this would work much better as a hero section, even if you don't agree with me. I think the reason I keep on highlighting any other section would be a better hero section is because after you look at this UI as a whole, you know there is no white space happening here. Yes, there's a little bit of space happening at the bottom and the left of the main section, but you lack white space, and it's exactly what's making this whole thing hard to look at, which is exactly what's making me mad about this whole story. There is no white space. When there is white space, finally, it's not in the hero section, which gives you the impression of everything is just way too glammed over here, and it's really difficult to work with. And now you finally get a really, really pretty looking CSS Figma combination of something funny actually happening when you start hovering over elements. This is exactly where you start to get these images that sort of switch around. This is exactly where you start to see things happen, and this is exactly where things start to be fun. But also, can I just say that this is happening in such a late hour for the site that it's just really difficult for me to say this is justifying the fancy element of this being an award site. Like, this is happening at the very bottom, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have fancy things at the bottom. I'm just saying maybe it would have been better if we had a little bit of motion, a little bit of animation, maybe some hover effects, cursor hijacks, any of those fancy elements, especially when we got started, because that was truly where things were starting to be empty. And then you get this very, very weird looking, what the hell is happening to this contrast, weird orange red mixed with a dirty shade of grey for the footer, which would have been fine as a pure black and white, don't get me wrong, but I have no idea why they brought in these two colors. It's very hard to look at, underwhelming, and it's not what you'd expect at all. And this looks like this, I don't want to say it, but this looks like some weird Squarespace themed footer, and they just kind of plugged it in and let it work, which isn't holding things against Squarespace, but you can't exactly call yourself an award site when you have something this weird and basic happening over and over again, and expect that to be the gold standard for everyone. Like, there isn't even logos here. How am I supposed to take you seriously? And this is exactly what's making me mad now that we've started talking about ageofunion.com. I haven't checked out what the navigation actually did, which was quite interesting to me. That wasn't just a navigation bar, that was a complete project section. I have no idea why I felt this was the navigation. This is the navigation. I'm either losing my mind, or the fact that there was an icon here and no icon here just made my mind do a flip. Again, with that said, the navigation is once again taking the exact same colors that the footer did and kind of making it switch around, and I'm still not impressed by this color combination. I don't know why plain black and white would have been a better pick here, but it just looks weird at this point, and it just looks very, very underwhelming. Like, it's not something I'd actually want to see. And now you have projects with again, I have to point out, we came to this project section hoping for the navigation bar to be here because I'm an idiot who doesn't like reading stuff, but this again is a much better contender for the hero section than the one we had, obviously, because there is a lot of white space happening, there are random elements, there is a title, there is a description, and yet things do seem like they would work well together. So I think the fact that the hero section was so underwhelming is what's making this whole site go down in the table for me when I start rating things. Again, you get hit with a bunch of really large images and large text, and it's really weird to look at, especially because white space is also very random. And then you get hit again with the same exact component that we've been working with, the weird cursor hijack for this weird list, and it looks really, really weird, if I'm being honest. It does. You have all of this text now. It's quite boring, it's quite exhausting, and yet it's their impact to date. Again, I like the fact that they've highlighted their numbers, but also coming back to the point that we mentioned when we were looking at the news articles for this site, this is not the font that you would want to have if you actually wanted the user to read anything at all. Like, this is too big, and it's taking up a lot of space. It's not even centered. This is literally a weird shift to the right, and it's definitely not small enough or simple enough for me to want to read at length. So that's also a point that we can't forget over here. You have this weird image scroll gallery that finally comes up. Why is it constantly happening that every single element that you would want to have, every single element that you would want to see as soon as the site got started, has been pushed off to such a huge length that now it's just not that fun to watch anymore? I think that's just happening over and over again. But other than that, very, very interesting. Is this a site that I'd rate 10 out of 10? No, because the hero section was exactly where the problem started happening for me, especially white space, which is the most basic thing in the whole wide world. But is it a site that I'd give 7 out of 10? Very happily. This is 7 out of 10, because yes, there was attempts to take a news site and make it into something that you wouldn't usually think about as a news site. Age of Union is definitely an effort into making your common news site work, but the fact that many core functionalities of a news site, for example reading large amounts of text, did not work right, and you'll get to see what I'm talking about right here. The fact that they tried to transform a news site, and yet the text that they came up with wasn't even centered, wasn't even very readable, especially when you try to take things at length, is exactly where the 3 points got cut off. This is exactly where I have to say, not going to work out. 7 out of 10, ageofunion.com. The next site that we're talking about, Inkfish. I just have to mention before we start this one, I don't know what site I'm going to be reviewing the day that I actually open these streams. These are all my first reactions, just so we can have a nice stream. And as soon as we got started, I am very, very nervous at what this is, because it's a video in the background, the same video in the background, once in the foreground once again, very, very random control command line-ish list of objects, and I have no idea what's going to happen now. Can we click on one of these? I don't think it's going to end well, but we can. But let's just go back to the hero section, see what we have from the start. Yes, we get started with the latest section. I think the fact, as soon as we get started, I think the fact this has a lot of text with not enough hierarchy is exactly what makes you very confused. So they do have a navigation, and I'm trying to break this down in real time. They do have a navigation that works. They do have entire sections that they've tried to separate, but it becomes quite a difficult thing to understand when you have a bunch of these things listed out, and when everything is very, very basic, because yes, you want all of these links to be there, homework, about, contact, and you kind of want these to be separate, and maybe you should have had a different font size or something from the rest of these. Again, the fact that they have a lot of text is very, very confusing to me right now. You get to see latest, and you get to see all of these different details. I still have no idea what the most of them do. I think these are separate card components, or that was the intention behind them. You got a card, you got some titles, you got some descriptions like documentary, time limit, title, whatever else they wanted for their category, and yet there is no separation. Like, simple cards would have functioned much better as opposed to whatever they've done here, because now you don't know as a user, even if it's obvious to the person who's made this, you don't know as a user whether this title belongs to the card at the top or the image at the bottom. I think that's exactly where things get very, very confusing. Big agency thinking, small agency attitude. Again, inspirational taglines, but the fact that they have only 2 different font sizes one is ginormous and the other is just what they'll continue with absolutely everyone is very, very concerning to me. Another point of concern is the fact that they had 4 different titles for their navigation bar, and they kind of made it weird with this 2 and 2, and you could have had 2 and 2 and kind of made them centered together, but they kind of just chose to dump 2 on one corner, dump 2 on the other corner, leave a lot of weird space over here, and yet make the whole thing work, which isn't immediately obvious. So at some point you end up thinking home and work is the same thing, about and contact is the same thing, if you were not reading. So that's also a fact with a site like this. You have a bunch of descriptions, and I hope some of these links work, and I still have no idea what this site does. It just says information services, clients, awards, and you kind of start to understand when you look real deep, but it's very difficult to understand even as someone who's just trying to understand what the hell this does. Let's look at work. Maybe it'll give us a little bit of a better idea as to what's happening. The only thing that I've been able to understand this far are these ginormous titles. I still have no idea why it says bracket numbers everywhere, probably because they've got 17 pieces of work, but is that really something you want to highlight that quickly? Is it? Like, you could have done it for the dedicated work section, but in the home section you still had work bracket 17, which is very, very weird. Like, this site could have been so much better, and yet it's extremely weird to look at. And once again you get bombarded with the same exact group of things. You have cards which aren't separated, bento grids, and no one knows the sizing. Why do we even have space at the bottom? Like, couldn't this have been centered? Again, I am struggling to even understand what's going on. This definitely looks like a crazy person's site, and I do not mean offense, but it definitely looks insane at this point. Finally, you start to see something a little bit calming happen over here. You have this title, and it takes up the entirety of your space, and you have all of this description and text and in white space. Everything that you would want to have, you finally do have. And now we lack images, which is another problem. I think the problem with the last section was these images were very, very random, and no one knew where they were, and text was difficult to understand with these images. And now the other problem that starts happening with the about page is exactly the inverse of it all, because you have this huge chunk of text and no images and just empty space, and you're supposed to take away whatever you want to take away from that, which is very weird. And I still have no idea what this site does. It's extremely weird. I do not have high hopes at all for these points. Like, sometimes you get to see elements that you actually say, this looks good, this works. For example, this one, like, this could have made a good footer, but they had to make it scrollable, and they had to. Why are they even giving you time? Is this an event? Hello, Inkfish. Why would they give you a city? And I understand why they'd give you a city and a date and a day. Is this a one-time thing? Why is there a time? Again, was this a studio? I have no idea what this actually is, because I've tried to understand, and yet it's very, very difficult to understand. I think this is the local time of the place. This has to be the local time, because what else could it possibly be? But if it is the local time, it isn't updating very well, which is also very weird. But I'm just going to have to acknowledge whatever this does. And you have text here. I have no idea what this site does. You will have to forgive me for that. inkfishnyc.com, 2 out of 10, because I have no idea what the site even does at this point, and I've been trying a really, really cool bunch to understand, and for someone who has a client that is 24-hour McDonald's, you would expect a better site at the very least. And as I'm looking at this final project, it starts to scroll horizontally, which I wasn't even aware was a part of their design system, and I'm even more confused now. This is a very confusing site. Very little pieces of things actually come together which make you say this is a good site, this has some good elements, which is the only reason I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. The next site that we're talking about, AANNNNDDDD.com/en. This might be a little bit better. I do have higher hopes for what this one is, because the last 2 or 3, I don't even remember now, have been quite disappointing. So let's just hope this is going to be a better one and get started. Right off the bat, very, very clean, very, very minimalistic, very, very standard serif clean layout, which is exactly what you'd want. You have an image, you have some text, it all looks very, very clean. You kind of scroll along. This is a special kind of a animation as a whole, but I've seen it happen over and over again, which is why not surprised by it. You have this image that kind of scrolls up to take the entirety of the space, and again I am bothered finally that although you have the white space working for you, there is no font variation, and it just escaped my focus. Before this, all of the sites that we saw were so weird and underwhelming that I completely forgot about font pairings and the whole world of typography, and the fact that Anai has actually given us a little bit of space to think about things, a little bit of white space. This is the point where I can finally think about font pairings and typography and all of the little elements that actually make a good site, as opposed to constantly being annoyed by the bunch of text that was in the last site. I am personally bothered by what the last site was. Do not get me wrong. This looks much cleaner, but again, is Arial or Arialish fonts really what you'd want to have on a site this clean? Is the true question for me today. You get to see the pretty version of brands and everything. Again, there is a cursor hijack, which makes me want to click on whatever this site is, look at it, be happy with how pretty it looks, and yet once again, a bunch of images, not enough text, which was exactly the problem with the first site we looked at today. I have no idea what this does. I am pretty sure this is a project. Why do we have a menu and not the option to get out of this page? This navigation actually looks quite pretty. You have a 3D window to kind of work with. Why would you have forest floors 3D window right here? No idea. You have an address, social media, a bunch of links. Again, I have no idea why you'd have a bunch of images of furniture with not enough text, especially because if you have impressive images, if you have impressive elements, now you want there to be text, now you want there to be call to action, and when you don't have that, that is when things really do start to stump me. Now you have your credits, and you have another one of these. I have no idea. There is a timer going on. This is literally a time bomb situation behind my actual camera, and they kind of scroll it for you. I have no idea how to go back to the actual first page of the site, which is something that they did leave out. I am impressed by this tree bark thing that they did with the latest projects. This is a cool effect to have. Again, compared to the last site that we looked at, Awwwards is incredible because you start to see clarity happen in real time, because there is a lot of white space to breathe, space to think about things. The font pairing for the title font isn't the worst, and yet you also get to see the things that they didn't do right, because now there is thinking space. So thinking space is a double-edged sword that you can really integrate into your site with white space. That's where I stand with what we're going for on this site. Again, another really incredible section that would have functioned well with as a hero section too, because you have every single quintessential element that you'd want for this to be the hero section. You have your title, you have your images, you have your transitions, everything works exactly as it's supposed to. There is an animation happening right here, and now you have your simple little footer. Again, it changes and you can copy it to clipboard, which is a cool effect, because I've always wanted to have that on my own sites, because of course the people going for your email, this is more of a UX concept than a UI concept. Of course the people going for your email would want to copy it, would want to use it. Sometimes when you use browsers, for example Chrome or even Firefox, and you kind of click on an email, it'll just take you to the weird mail to link, and it'll open Outlook if you're on Windows, which is weird if you don't use Outlook for maybe your first primary mode of communication, and it becomes a whole hassle. So you can just copy the email to clipboard, and that's taking steps off my user experience journey, which is a nice thing to have. A ton of white space. I am still underwhelmed by the sans serif font. Why would you want an Arialish font to work here? This isn't Arial, but it's very, very close, which is not impressing me at all. But the serif font does work. There is white space. You have every single element that you needed to have, and honestly, after the sites that we've seen today, I am just grateful it has all of the basic elements it showed. Overall, 8 out of 10 Awwwards.co, because you do have every single thing that you'd want to have on a perfect site. The small number of things that you would need, for example a good sans serif font and maybe a little bit of final touches to get this site too perfect, is there. But also the fact that they couldn't get it too perfect is also what's making me pull back the final 2 points. The next site that we're talking about, 53w53.com. If you have come from the live stream that we're doing this on, because yes, there is a live stream, but there are also going to be cuts of this live stream later on this channel. If you have come from the thumbnail of this live stream, you will instantly recognize this UI. Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about what it does. Is this going to be a good one? Possibly. Is this going to make us feel bad about the entirety of this live stream? I don't know, because I am still not sure what this site will do, because today's stream has been very, very mixed as far as mixed UIs are concerned. You have a bunch of links. Again, Arialish font not making me happy. Also, where is your contrast at? I do want to ask very, very quickly, because you have an image in your background, open skies, weird situation, not enough text shadow, which is, wow, why is this even happening? Like, this should have been having better contrast, which didn't even need you to change your colors. Like, having a drop shadow in the background of this is such a wonderful hack if you want to make your UIs actually look good. But there is a logo, there are a couple of navigation links, there is an image, you have your titles, every basic thing that you should have, you do have, and that consistency remains when you start scrolling, which is nice. And these images have a color scheme that actually works with your text, which wasn't really happening in the last sites that we saw, which is why this is really, really a calm down kind of effect for me. Again, when you see an image this pretty, you expect there to be at the very least some sort of text, some sort of description of what's going on, but you don't see it, which is not the most hurtful thing in the whole wide world, but it's kind of there. So this is very, very underwhelming up until this point, and then you get to see some more text, image, description of the same exact format. Again, I am so underwhelmed by the fact that you have all of these different images going on a bunch of white space, and yet there is so much that is just left unsaid, because this site started off really clean and really, really pretty, but it became a template very, very quickly. Did you notice that this site started off really pretty with a lot of symbolism and cleanliness and minimalism in it, and yet it became really, really draggish as soon as you started to repeat the same patterns over and over again. You have an image, you have some text, you have a title, and then you get a whole weird space holder kind of image with no text, no description whatsoever. I think the whole template kind of repeats itself, and that's when it becomes really, really boring really, really quickly. The interesting part does come in when you start looking at the footer, which is nice. You have all of these different links, different languages, different press release informations, links, titles, whatever else you'd want to have, and you can go back to the top, which is also an incredible piece of element. Overall, this seems to be a bit of a repetition of its own self, and it repeats itself very, very quickly. I don't even want to look at these other links because I sensed it before it started, and I'm going to talk about this again. You have the same exact element, image, title, description, CTA, space holder image, and this is going to repeat itself over and over and over again, and you can kind of see it coming to the point where it becomes drastically boring. I understand the fact that when you make something actually pretty, when you make something that actually stands out, you'd want to repeat it over and over again for consistency to get the users used to it, but you also need to have other elements going. If you have the same exact site repeating the same exact elements over and over again, and this looks like a drag because it is a drag, because surprise, surprise, there is not a lot of interesting stuff happening, which is exactly what makes me hate this entire drag of a site. Overall, 53 West, 53, 4 out of 10, because yes, they did have a good template, yes, they started off strong, but the strong started repeating itself in 2 seconds, and it became a quick recursion into a loop of madness, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. The last site that we're talking about today, significo.com. No idea what this is going to do. I do have high hopes. Let's hope they don't disappoint us, because that's all we can hope for these days. We started strong with a video, which sometimes plays, sometimes doesn't. Janky but works. We have a title, we have a navigation, and a bunch of animations. Again, every basic element that you needed to have, you do have. You have a tagline and a button to scroll down, and I don't have much to wow, there was something really fun happening. Did you guys notice that I didn't even do anything, and I want to take myself onto the other side of the page? Did I come on the other side of the page? I have no idea. I did. I want to talk about this effect so much, which is why I had to shift my camera. When you kind of start to go down, you missed out on the most interesting part of this whole site. I don't know how they made it. I don't know why they made it work, but you kind of already missed out on the most interesting part, which this might have been a skip to content, but this seems like a scroll from the video, and yet the whole thing that happens kind of takes you away from the most interesting part. I think this could have made a really pretty hero section too, but it just is one of those sections that they try to put a lot of effort into making, and then they discount it really quickly, which is what's annoying me so much about this site. And then you get, what the hell happened? Wow, this site reloaded itself. No idea why. Let's keep on scrolling. You started strong, but then something really interesting happened. When things got boring, they switched out the background colors, which is a nice thing to do. And I've talked about this so many times in the old streams. When your UI gets continuous and boring, it might make sense to take the things that you've been doing and switch out the background colors. It's the quickest way to make things interesting. The thing that I did talk about also here is, why is your background image missing? Why is your image missing? Sometimes images will either be too heavy to load on the same thread, it takes a lot of time, or they're not present here at all, and suddenly the most interesting thing about this entire website is the fact that I have my video on it, which is very weird, because we were expecting an image over here and yet it did not come, which is weird. And again, you start with icons and all of these different cards, and I was hoping these cards and these icons would have some color to them, some shine to them, which is not present, which is also driving me mad now. They try to make things interesting by switching out background colors and stuff, and yet at the point where they're supposed to surprise you, they disappoint you, which isn't fun to me at all. Real talk, real impact. Now we're in the domain of horizontal scrolling, and can I just say, this section is very interesting. This would have made an incredible hero section. This looks really pretty. They are repeating the same pattern over again, but they're doing it in such a way where you're not tired of it, and it does look pretty. So I'm going to give this a pass. I think this was the prettiest section of the entirety of the site, and they kind of dropped the ball on this one, because they could have had it in the hero. It could have looked much better, as opposed to a simple weird video playing at the top, which is a disappointment compared to the stuff that's going on over here. And then you get this huge chunk of text, which arguably could have done a better job if it was smaller, and they tried to make it scroll with your scroll, so you'd basically read along to it. But it's not a definite, like, trying to get the user to read along by changing the colors is something that you can do, but it doesn't guarantee user will actually read it, and it just makes your whole area a lot more cluttered. So I think 50-50 for this effect, and then you kind of keep on doing it over and over again while leaving 50% of your screen blank, which is also starting to feel like not white space, just waste of space now. Again, at the end of the day, they're trying to make a really pretty site happen, and as soon as they get their bad juju over with, they get once again, they get to the more interesting stuff for this site. I think this is once again one of those elements, with the other two previous nice looking sections, that could have made an interesting site. I think this site tried to either be very long, tried to make everything interesting, and they should have cut out a couple of parts. For example, the way they styled this one, or the way they styled the first part. So this is this site follows a very weird pattern. It takes one very normal thing, does two incredible things, and then gets back to the normal thing, which is why you're not able to categorize this site as something that's very interesting. Check it out. Very normal. Very intriguing. Very intriguing, but then it becomes really normal because you have no color change. Very intriguing. Very boring and normal. And then you get another very intriguing, interesting section. So I think they're just trying to alternate, still not able to figure out what you should actually edit out, and that's what's getting us stuck here. So once again, very intriguing, 45-degree pill angle, taking things, rotating things, letting there be a lot of color, which is an interesting misused, less used skill nowadays. you don't get to see enough color contrast happen, not at least on this stream. So I think it's nice that they're letting there be this much color and letting there be this much contrast. Love the footer, love the way they've structured things to make them work, and I also love the animation that happens when you kind of go to the footer, which this is exactly the kind of footer, the kind of last section that I'd give a 10 out of 10. But as far as the whole site is concerned, Significo willingly or unwillingly added 1 or 2 sections, especially in the beginnings, especially when things actually started to change for the site, that made things seem like a drag. For example, this hero section, which is supposed to be the most important part of the entire site, and yet it became the most underwhelming part, which is why I have to give this site a 9 out of 10. That and the fact that there wasn't enough color over here, especially in the icons only. And also one last element that made me be really, really angry at the entirety of the site. Why is there so much empty space? Does making this text huge guarantee that the user would actually read it, or does it make things even more irritating when you're trying to scroll past it? So I think that's definitely something they missed at. Making this even smaller, making things a little bit better structured, especially for something as simple as testimonials, would have been fine. Overall, Significo 9 out of 10. Is this one of the best sites we've seen on this stream? Yes. Did I like it? Absolutely. Will you see me again tomorrow, 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time or 3:30 p.m. GMT? Yes, you will. I hope you had fun. I hope you liked what we did on this stream. We're going to come here live once again tomorrow, as I just said, and we're going to talk about more incredible award sites. Until next time, keep on designing, keep having fun. Good night.